It was a registered gun. Our records show that Mr. Nesbitt applied for a license to have a gun on the premises in August of 1989. That permit was still in effect.
So there was nothing unusual or illegal about the gun being in the drugstore? Is that correct, Mr. Forbes?
Presumably he wanted it for the store. That is correct.
I arrived at the crime scene at 5:15. There was some merchandise on the floor of the drugstore in between the counters. The body of the victim was lying halfway. His legs were half sticking out from behind the counter. I looked around the counter and observed a middle-aged black male of approximately 200 pounds. It was pretty clear that he was dead. The cash register was open. The change was still in there, but no bills. Also, there were several cartons of cigarettes on the floor, and the clerk mentioned that several cartons of cigarettes were missing. We chalked the body, then had it turned.
What do you mean when you say you chalked the body?
That's when you put a chalk mark around the body to show what position you found it in. We chalked it so we can turn it over and see if there was any possible evidence beneath the victim. I didn't see anything there. From the money being gone from the register, I figured it was a stick-up and homicide.
The bullet entered the body on the left side and traversed upward through the lung. It produced a tearing on the lung and heavy internal bleeding and also went through the esophagus. That also produced internal bleeding. The bullet finally lodged in the upper trapezius area.
And you were able to recover the bullet from that area?
Yes, we were.
Dr. Moody, can you tell with reasonable certainty the time and cause of the death?
Death was caused by a combination of trauma to the internal organs, which put the victim into a state of shock, as well as the lungs filled with blood. He wouldn't be able to breathe.
You mean he literally drowned in his own blood?
Yeah, well, I found where the payday is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess.
You guess? What you guessing about when I'm so flat I ain't got enough money to buy a can of beer? I need to put together a payroll crew. Get my pockets fat. FAT, I talked to Bobo and he's down, but Bobo liable not to show. When he shows correct, but sometimes he act like a spaceman or something.
Bobo's not Einstein.
Whatever. You don't have to be no Einstein to get paid. All you got to have is heart. You got the heart?
For what?
To get paid. I gotta sure get over. You know that drugstore got burned out that time? They got it all fixed up now. Drugstores always keep some money.
That's what Bobo said.
Yeah. All we need is a lookout. Check the place out, make sure ain't no badges comping some Z's in the back. You down for it? So what it is? So what it is? So what it is? So what it is? So what it is?
The state calls Laurel Henry. Mrs. Henry, do you remember an incident that occurred last December in Harlem?
Yes, I do.
Can you tell us about that incident?
My granddaughter had a cold. It was just a few days before Christmas. I had taken her to Harlem Hospital and they said it wasn't serious, but she was still coughing. I went into the drugstore to look for some cough medicine. I was looking over the medicines, trying to figure out which would be best for her, when I heard someone arguing.
Do you remember what the argument was about?
No, I don't.
Then what happened?
The store owner, Mr. Nesbitt, came over to see what the argument was about, and I heard one of the men who were involved in the argument say to him, ask him where the money was.
How sure are you that this is what he said?
Not that sure. It's what I think I heard.
And what did you see during this time?
I saw two young men engaged in an argument. Then I saw one of them grab the drugstore owner by the collar.
And then what did you do?
I left the store as quickly as I could. I thought there might be trouble.
Mrs. Henry, do you recognize anyone present today in this courtroom who was also in the drugstore on the day to which you are referring?
The gentleman sitting at that table was one of the men arguing.
Let the record show that Mrs. Henry has indicated that the defendant, James King, was one of the men she saw in the drugstore on that day. Mrs. Henry, do you remember the day you witnessed the incident at the drugstore?
The 22nd of December. It was a Monday. I didn't want Tracy, my granddaughter, missing too much school. I thought she could get through the next day or so.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Mrs. Henry, did you have occasion to see some photographs of Mr. King?
Yes, I did, at the police station.
You heard about the robbery and the death of Mr. Nesbitt and you went to the police. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the police showed you a series of pictures. Would you say 1,000 pictures?
1,000. No, maybe 30 to 40.
Maybe 20?
I think more than 20.
Would you say 27?
I couldn't say for sure.
So the truth is that the police showed you a few photographs and asked you to cooperate with them in finding the killer. Is that correct?
More or less.
More or less? Well, I want to get to the truth of this matter, Mrs. Henry. The police did show you the pictures, and they were looking for your cooperation in finding the killer? Is that correct?
Yes.
Mrs. Henry, while you were looking over the pictures, were there moments of hesitation? Were there moments when you weren't quite sure, or did you recognize Mr. King as soon as you saw his picture?
I didn't recognize him at first, but then I did. The pictures look different than he does in person.
So how did you recognize him if he looks different in person than he does in the photographs?
I finally recognized him. And when I see him now, I recognize him.
Mrs. Henry, were you ever given a description of Mr. King? Ever told how much he weighed or how tall he was?
No, I was not.
Did you ever identify Mr. King in the lineup?
Yes, I did.
Was that before or after you saw the photographs?
That was after I saw the photographs.
And how many men were in the lineup?
I believe there were 6.
6. Only 6. Nothing further.
No questions, Your Honor.
Is there any question in your mind that the man you identified from photographs is the same man who sits at this table?
No, there is not.
Thank you. Nothing further.
When this guy gets on the stand, I want you to take notes. Just write down any questions you want us to ask him.
Like what?
Don't worry about it. We just need the jury to know we're challenging this guy.
Richard Bobo Evans, Your Honor.
Your Honor, could we have a sidebar? Why is he dressed in a prison uniform? The prosecution is going to try to connect him with my client. With him in prison gear, that prejudices my client.
He refused to put on his suit. We made the offer.
It's still prejudicial.
To tell you the truth, I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference. This guy looks like a basket case and he's going to act like one. I don't want to hold the case up while you convince this guy to wear a suit. Let's get on with the case.
I'd like to establish the objection.
Okay, and I'll overrule it. Let's get going.
Now, Mr. Evans, do you know the people who are seated at these 2 tables, Mr. Steve Harmon and Mr. James King?
Yay, I know them.
How long have you known them?
I've been knowing King all my life. I just met the other guy before the robbery went down.
Before we go any further, Mr. Evans, one noticed that you are wearing a prison uniform. What is your current status?
I'm doing 7.5 to 10 years at Greenhaven.
What are you doing time for?
selling drugs.
And you've been arrested before.
I've been arrested for breaking and entering, grand theft auto, and one time taking a car radio and one time for fighting a guy what died.
So the arrest for fighting a guy that died was manslaughter, is that right?
Yeah. I got 3 years.
I think the record will show you got 5 to 10 years and served 3. Is that correct?
Whatever.
Mr. Evans, can you tell me what happened on the 22nd of December of last year?
Me and King planned out a get-over and we done it.
Can you explain to the jury what this particular get-over was?
We hit a drugstore.
Can you tell me as much as you can about the plan and about what actually happened?
We went over to the place and sat down on the car outside. Then we got the sign from him.
Let the record show that Mr. Evans is pointing toward Mr. Harmon. Go on.
Objection.
Sustained. Is he identifying him or not?
Can you identify the man from whom you got the sign that everything was all right?
That's him, sitting next to the women.
Let the record show that Mr. Evans is identifying Mr. Harmon. Go on.
So we got the sign that everything was cool. King took a hit on some crank we had and then we went in. We started it before the dude behind the counter. He came up with a chrome and started shouting and stuff.
A chrome?
Yay. A gun. Anyway, King was trying to get the gun from him and I was going for the money. Then I heard the gun go off. I looked over and saw the guy falling down and King was holding the chrome. We grabbed what we wanted and split. That was it.
What else did you grab besides the money?
We took some cigarettes and left.
What happened to the stolen money?
Like I said, we spent some of it on fried chicken and wedgies. Then me and King split the rest.
Can you tell me how it was that you were arrested?
I sold the cigarettes to this guy, his name is Bolton or something like that. Then he sold them to a white boy and then the white boy dropped a dime on him and he dropped it on me. Then the cops came and started talking to me. I said I didn't know nothing about it, but then I got busted and a ambulance went down.
Can you explain to the jury how you were busted?
Man, this lame-looking brother with an attaché case come up to me and said he wanted to cop some rocks. I was so knocked out by this spare dude asking for crack that I slept the real deal. I laid the rocks on him and he slapped the cuffs on me. Cops don't usually show lame. That was definitely not correct.
He carried an attaché case.
Can you believe that crap?
Nothing further.
The people rest.